Alright, so, Dr. Shelton, can you please tell me your full name and why your parents did select this name for you, if you can?
My full name is Lee Raymond Shelton, and my father's name was Lee Andrew Shelton. They didn't name me Lee Andrew because he didn't want me to be called Junior, but my mother succeeded in calling me Junior anyway.
So was your nickname Junior?
With some people.
Most
people would call me Lee.
Okay.
What school did you attend?
Elementary school. I attended the Gethsemane Elementary School. It was first grade to 12th grade school. The same school my parents attended. When they attended, however, they could only go to 11th grade because they didn't want black people to graduate high school. So no school that black people attended went beyond 8th grade, went beyond 11th grade, I'm sorry. And I was in college when my dad went back and got his high school degree.
Wow. Okay.
Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in October of 1927.
And did your family live there before you were there, or did you end up moving there?
They moved there from Wilmington, North Carolina, and were there while she had 3 boys.
I was born in Franklin County, North Carolina. My grandmom was a midwife. She delivered me. And when I was home a few years ago, I saw the chimney to the house that I was born in 1938.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Ansley. This is my cousin. Hello.
My name is Eileen Wilson Gray.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions, as you all know. So where were you born and why?
I was born in Washington, D.C. in 1953.
Okay, what was your neighborhood like? Did you like growing there?
I loved growing up there. It was a neighborhood of single-family homes. Just about everybody lived with their mom and dad, and it was a nice, middle-class neighborhood. And I grew up with my mom and dad, and I had a brother and a sister.
Okay, nice. How did your family end up in D.C.?
Well, my father grew up in South Carolina, and back in 1920s, they moved from South Carolina to Washington, D.C. for more opportunities. And my mother, who was born in Atlanta, but grew up in upstate New York, and she ended up moving to Washington during World War II. And she met my father in the 1940s in Washington, D.C., and that's where I was born.
What is your full name?
My name is Eunice Lockhart Moss.
Why did your parents select this name for you?
Well, it's the same. Eunice Lockhart is my mother's name. So my mother gave me her name.
Did you have a nickname?
Yes. My nickname was Jean. Well, it's not really a nickname, it's a middle name, but all the family called me Jean.
Like this. When?
I was born in Jefferson Davis County, Mississippi, and it was November 28, 1942.
How did your family come to live there?
Well, my father was born in that community, and when he got married to my mother, she came to live with him there, and then I was born there.
What is your full name and why did your parents decide to give you that name?
Well, my full name is Eva Ruth Bird. Eva Ruth Brown Bird. And they decided to give me that name because Eva was kind of like more like the Eve in the Bible and Ruth in the Bible. Brown was my maiden name, and Bird was my married name.
When and where were you born?
I was born in what they call Brooks County, Georgia. It's called Dixie, Georgia. Not far from Quitman. That was sort of our main shopping place, whatever. But in Brooks County, we were like way down in the country, way down there. Houses like half a mile apart.
What year?
April 3rd, 1923.
So that would make you 91? Almost 91.
Almost.
My name is Janice Omega McDaniel. My mother and father, I had one child before me, and they said somebody recommended that they name me Janice. They said that would be a nice name, and my mother said, okay. So that's how I got my name. I have no nicknames when I was a child. Since I've gotten older, though, people do call me Jan. Most of the times, though, they just call me Janice. I was born May the 20th, 1939, in Dayton, Ohio. My family came to Dayton because my father said they heard in Louisiana, where he was born, that they were hiring in Dayton. And there were a lot of places, NCR, Frigidaire, a lot of places here. So he came to Dayton and he got a job here.
What school did you attend?
I went to, which one?
Elementary.
Elementary. I went to a little 2-room elementary school in Chester, Pennsylvania, where they had first, second, and third in one room, fourth, fifth, and sixth in the other room. 2 teachers, one of them was the principal in Chester. It was called Perry A. Wright School.
Was it segregated?
Yeah, I grew up in a segregated area.
Okay.
Well, I didn't get that much of an education. I really didn't start learning anything until I got to the 7th grade. My teachers, God bless them, spent a lot of time, talking to one another at the door. And we had, assignments to do. But if we acted up a little bit, and I did act up, we would get a whipping when we got home. In addition to the one we got there, they were whipping a lot.
What kind of games did you play growing up?
Let's see. I played rolling a rubber tire off a car. You get a tire, and when there's no car on it, it's just a tire. So you just kind of make it roll, and then you run behind it. And that was my favorite game. No batteries included.
Wilson Industrial School was about 5 miles from my home. And I would pass the White High School on my way to my school.
So your school was not integrated? Was your school integrated?
No.
I went to Roosevelt High School for 4 years. I went to Whittier Elementary School for 8 years. Went to Whittier, and that was a school where you would go to school and then you would come home for lunch. So we walked to school. It was a long ways. Walked to school, and then we walked back home in the rain, in the snow, any kind of weather. We walked back home for lunch, and then we rushed back to school to get there on time because we lived a long ways from school. There were some children who lived closer, but we lived a long ways, so we had to really rush to get back. We had a good principal there, though, so he knew that we lived a long way. So when it was bad weather, he would drive up and down the road and pick up all the kids that were trying to get back to school on time. this was an elementary school that had, they was integrated, but it had mostly white students there. Most of the black students went to another school. I forget the name of that school, but this was integrated, but there were a few of us there. The principal was white, the one that used to go around and pick us up. Was a very nice person. And the students that lived close to school, they were all white. So all the black kids lived way, way away from school, but it was a integrated school, and we enjoyed each other. Also, that we used to eat at school, and there were some restaurants close to the school that we could not eat in. So we had to be careful where we ate lunch. And we were kids, we would be playing with our friends, but then we separated lunchtime because they could go in that restaurant, but we could not.
There was a town in Boston, it is South Boston, and in South Boston there is Irish people live there, and they did not want to integrate their schools with the blacks. So that created quite a bit of disturbance in Boston. And even Dr. King came there to watch in regards to that.
Where did you go to college?
Well, I went to college at Fort Valley State College in Fort Valley, Georgia. When I graduated from high school, I hadn't quite turned 17 yet, still 16. And my mom and daddy were very strict. And she said I was too young and inexperienced to go to college. So I didn't go. And then the war started, the First World War, Second World War started. And I got a job when I was about 19. I got a job at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So it was like growing up. And my Aunt Mary lived down in Quitman, Georgia, and she used to come and spend summers with us. And she used to take courses at Fort Valley State College. So when I was 21 years old, I told her I wanted to go down there. I was bored. Even with the job, I was bored. My best friend was engaged. My sister that I was close to had just gotten married, and I wasn't interested in any of that. So I went down with her just to spend some time, and I went to Fort Valley with her, and I fell in love with it, and just like that, I just went to college. It wasn't planned or anything. After college, well, I majored in sociology, but then I sort of did a double major in secondary education. When I left college, well, I didn't work actually for a long time. I was married when I was in college, and so I was kind of like a stay-at-home mother for 13 years.
Do you remember segregation as a child?
Yeah, my whole life was a life of segregation. We went to all-black schools. We went to the all-black churches. Mm-hmm. There were even people, if they went shopping in town, many of them we weren't allowed to try on clothes or try on hats and things like that. As a result, Dad seldom let us go into town. Mm-hmm. Usually he would go in and purchase whatever we needed and bring it back home, and that's what we wore. So that way we avoided the confrontation of segregation, but we experienced the effects of segregation.
When my brother Marvin was in college, my father needed a little help with his tuition, and he tried to mortgage a nice brick house in a nice neighborhood to pay, to get money to pay his tuition, and the bank would loan it to him. They didn't think that was a good reason to loan him money.
What were some of the signs of Jim Crow that you encountered?
Right there in Chester, that's in Pennsylvania. We were still segregated. We couldn't sleep in the hotel there, couldn't eat in the restaurants. So that there was a lot of segregation. We were still almost like worse than being in the South. We weren't getting the kinds of jobs that other people were getting, the other people. So it was. I grew up even in the North in a segregated environment.
How long were you in Chester?
I didn't ride the bus because you had to sit in the back of the bus. I only rode the bus when I broke my leg playing soccer and had to get on the bus. So I would ride a bicycle to school, or my mother would take me to school. I didn't go to the movies because you had to sit in the balcony at the movie. I always was sensitive about being discriminated against.
I sat down on the counter, at the counter, going to get a beverage, and the waitress informed me that you can order, but you can't sit here. And so that was disheartening, because that was the first time I knew that it happened, but it was the first time that it happened to me. And so, of course, that we all left that cafe. I remember about segregation because we had the first television set on our street. And so we loved to watch TV, but there were very, very few black people on television. And anytime we saw a black person on television, we would say, look, mommy, look, mommy. And we were so happy to see someone on television that looked like us. But then, most of the times, those people were acting like clowns. They weren't acting intelligently. They were not a good representation of how the black people acted. But it was like they were clowning. And I think we realized that that's the only way that they could get a job on television. That was one thing that I think we all knew.
I attended Lucas Elementary School, and that was the only school in the community where I lived.
Was it an integrated elementary school?
No, it was a segregated elementary school. All the students there were African American.
Do you remember segregation?
I do, because my early childhood was in an all-black, I lived in an all-black community. And I went to school in an all-black school, and I went to church as an all-black church. And I ate in all-black restaurants, and everything I did was all black people.
What were some of the signs of Jim Crow that you encountered?
Well, I didn't encounter any unless I left that community. And when I was old enough to leave that community, I always liked to eat ice cream. And so in the ice cream parlor, you could only eat ice cream that was bought in the black section, and it said colored only. And it meant that's where you had to get your ice cream.
There was a time where our family wanted to drive to South Carolina for a family visit, and I just remember we used to always pack our own food in the car so that we would not have to stop at restaurants. And I remember once that we stopped somewhere and there was a whites only sign, and so my cousin, who was sort of a hothead, just kind of got really really angry and upset, and so we just drove off and went somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, so in South Carolina definitely was worse than like you're kind of in the north in DC.
Yeah.
As far as that goes.
Well, actually, it's interesting. A lot of people think that DC is the north. Actually, if you look historically where the Mason-Dixon line is, and the Mason-Dixon line is really up in Pennsylvania, so DC is technically the south.
Yeah.
But with that being said, DC wasn't as bad as Virginia. It wasn't as bad as South Carolina and North Carolina, but DC is considered the South.
Okay.
What were some of the signs of Jim Crow that you encountered?
Well, Jim Crow would be going to the bus station, seeing the white-only sign over one door and the Negro sign over the other. And believe it or not, when I was a young girl, I was not allowed to go to the movie. I was not allowed to take a bus anywhere because of that. So, because the movie meant that you didn't sit in the orchestra downstairs. If you went to the movie, I understand you had to go upstairs to the balcony. So I never went to the movie as a young girl.
Okay.
And I never rode on a bus besides the school bus as a young girl.
Okay.
I remember that when you went to the department stores, there were no clerks there that were our color. There were only white clerks there. All the black people were assigned to positions in the warehouse part. They were in the background. Never saw one in the front part of the store. They were all janitors or those kinds of things. And that was a real memory that I have. I also remember when they were trying to integrate this kind of the stores downtown. And so that brought to everybody's attention that there was a lot of segregation going on in Dayton, Ohio. Well, their rules were that you could buy clothes at the department store, black people could, but black people could not return any items. White people could, but black people were not allowed to return anything that they purchased. No clothing.
You encountered when you were of that age?
Yeah, signs over the water fountains, balcony for the theater. Of course, we couldn't eat in the restaurants. We lived near Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach and Myrtle Beach. But we couldn't go to those beaches to play. We could go there to work. We couldn't go there to play, so I didn't go to those beaches.
My father used to take us to the movies. We were only allowed to sit in the balcony of the movies. We could not sit on the floor. We had to go in the balcony and watch the movies. That was another form of discrimination that I ran into when I was a young girl. We didn't think it was all that bad, though. We thought the balcony was the best seat in the house.
No, my mom always told us that we were as good as anybody else, so I never felt whatever they call inferiority complex. I never felt that. But what I couldn't do was because of a lack of funds. We were poor, we were depression people, and so we just kind of struggle along. So whatever restrictions I had was because of a lack of funds.
I don't ever remember having a problem having a job. I've never been discriminated against that I know about in getting a job. I was very fortunate that I got a job right out of high school. I don't feel like I was discriminated against, but I do feel that I needed more education. So I went back to school and got some education. And I had no problems in the workforce, especially when I started teaching. There were other people that had problems, and you could see that they were being discriminated against, but I didn't have that, no overt discrimination.
I was trained as a sociologist, and I guess I was going to be a social worker, but there were very limited areas in which women or black women or blacks could be trained. And so sociology was one of those areas that where you could get training, and so I chose that simply to get on with getting out of college.
Did you have difficulties getting a job because of your race?
Not as a social worker.
Was there anything you felt you couldn't do because of your race, or identify?
Well, I guess I never felt there was anything I couldn't do, but the reality was that there were many things I couldn't do. One was want to be trained as an economist.
Still. Now, when I got ready to go to college, I couldn't go to college, the white colleges in North Carolina, Duke University, University of North Carolina, Wake Forest, those kind of schools that are famous. I couldn't attend them, and I had always wanted to be a physician, so I had to find a black school that had some sort of record of getting students prepared for medical school. And I ended up going to Howard University, and because Howard had a medical school, that was choices were very narrow back in those days. I went to Howard and when I finished Howard, I applied for the Howard University medical school, and I was real optimistic. I only applied to one school. Competition for seats in medical schools has always been keen, but I was accepted and entered the medical school in 1951. Went to Tuskegee, Alabama to do a residency in general surgery. And I finished that residency and came to Atlanta to finish the residency training in 1959 and finished that up in 61. And I was certified by the American Board of Surgeons, member of the American College of Surgeons, and practiced medicine here and retired in 1992.
Was it difficult to find a job in Atlanta, being African American during this time?
Well, since I was a professional, I set up my own practice. My problem there, getting started, was that I was, like you say, I was black, and white people didn't come to my office, and I didn't attend Morehouse, so I didn't get support from the Morehouse doctors, and so pickings were pretty slim, and I was in a specialty and needed referrals from people, from other doctors. So the beginning of my career here was very slow and discouraging initially.
Did you participate in any type of demonstration or protest?
Oh yeah, well, not until the 60s.
Right.
When my daughter came home, she was in college, and she came home with this afro. You know, it shocked us in the beginning. And my husband wanted her to cut it off, but then after a while, we all fell into it, and all of us, started wearing the afro. And then we started marching. I mean, I did a lot of marching, and my son opened up a project called AFCOM, and that was for training of young Africans, you know, about their culture and so forth. So that AFCOM Learning Center was there next door to where my husband had his church during the whole time, and we just worked and marched. In fact, my house was, what you call it? Like a phone, when you put the telephone, they had us.
Oh, not telemarketing. I know what you mean though.
They had us targeted. What did you say?
Did they tap your phone line?
Yeah, they tapped it.
Oh.
Yeah, because, you know, we were just too active during that time with marches and meetings and so forth. My three children were very, very militant, very militant. My daughter would sit in the, she went to the University of Pennsylvania. She and a crowd would go at the president's office or wherever they were meeting and just stay there. They wouldn't move, you know. They were put out one time, put in prison.
You know, they had the restaurant, the sit-ins and the restaurant demonstrations. We were demonstrating all around town. The doctors joined the students. We supported them, bailed them out of jail and all that sort of thing. We went as a group to the Heart of Atlanta Motel down on Portland Street and sat in the restaurant. We filled the restaurant up that evening. And Martin Rolliston, the lawyer who owned it, was bent out of shape. He was angry. He was walking around with a pistol in his hand. And he said he would leave or he was going to have us arrested. So he did call the police. So I went over to the telephone on the wall and called Dolores and asked her if I could go to jail. And she said no. And she's recorded as saying that if anybody around here goes to jail, it should be me, so I can get 3 or 4 days rest. These 4 children.
Did you participate in any type of protest?
Yes. In the early 60s, I participated in the marches and the freedom schools and through the courts. In fact, one of the things that happened based on our court case was the Fair Housing Act in the state of Wisconsin.
I did participate in protests. There was a man who came to the school and he asked us if we would help to try to integrate the restaurants around the school that I mentioned earlier, the restaurants that we could not go to. And so several of us, black students, we took off that day at lunchtime, and we all marched into this restaurant that we were not allowed to eat in. So we were told to sit on the at the stools on the counter, and we did that. And we sat there until we were waited on. And all the black kids looked at us like, what is going on here? And now when I was older, we talk about this, my friends and I, and they didn't realize that we weren't allowed in that. We got along fine. The students got along fine. It was that the older people were not allowing us to be what we wanted to be. And
when I left the residency over there and came to Atlanta, I had been listening to Shuttlesworth and the civil rights leaders in around Tuskegee for several months, and I was all fired up. But when I got here, I had decided that I was not going to I was not going to yield to discrimination any longer. Okay, and so when I got here, I started going in the white toilets, drinking at the fountains, and going where I please, sort of, daring anybody to stop me.
Where were you when Martin Luther King was shot?
Okay, Glenn, your dad was 4 years old. That was going to be his birthday. That was his birthday. He was going to have a birthday party. I was at school and we heard that Martin Luther King had been shot. And that just stopped everything. That just sucked all the air out of the room. And he was in nursery school. Your dad was at nursery school. We left school, everybody left school. I went and picked him up and we went home.
How did it make you feel? What was your first reaction when you heard the news?
It was total. I couldn't believe he just. First, I was really upset, really disturbed about the fact that somebody would take a gun and shoot him down on a balcony. And I felt sad. I felt, I can remember stopping by the nursery to pick Glenn up and just feeling empty, like I had lost a real close relative. It was a sad time.
What can you describe the March on Washington like?
I was just talking about that on the way home. It was like, I called it a field day in heaven. It was just that beautiful. Just thousands and thousands and thousands of people, every race, every culture. And it was just nothing but peace in Georgia. Everybody happy, everybody walking around, talking, sharing with whatever food or whatever they had. Just thousands of people. It was just beautiful. Well, I would think that at almost 91 years old that I have seen everything, but that is not true. I still see and witness situations that I never would have imagined, like being able to carry a gun to church, or even to stand your ground and that kind of thing. It just seems like life is just so invaluable now. People don't seem to care at all about the dignity of life, and respect for one another. It's just so shocking, and it just gets worse all the time, the way the young kids are treated. The young ones are taken advantage of, abuse and all. It never seems to end, and it's always something new, that I haven't seen before at 91.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For sharing your story and telling us how it was back then, all the advancements that you participated in and changed for society today. So really, really thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right.
One thing you most want people to remember about you?
Well, I want them to remember my gorgeous grandchildren. My legacy. You're my legacy. And a good legacy you are too. Right?
Right.
Right.
That's it?
That's all.
All right.
Police dogs are fire hoses, tear gas and broken noses, boycotts, marches, demonstrations, the fight for civil rights throughout the nation. Police dogs are fire hoses, tear gas and broken noses, boycotts, marches, demonstrations, the fight for civil rights throughout the nation. The Civil War was over and life was looking splendid. The Union had prevailed and slavery had ended. Human beings could no longer be bought and sold, but in the South the Jim Crow laws took hold, saying Restaurants, hotels, schools, and other spaces should be separate but equal for the different races. Separate was real but equal, no way. Plus he challenged it, but the court said it was okay. But the law was just one form of persecution. Mobs took part in the violent retribution, beating us down when we stood up for our rights, or killing black men just for looking at whites. The NAACP fought Jim Crow in courts, but to turn the tide of racism, they needed more.